Nerdrotic.com.
Welcome back to Nerdrotic. My name is Gary Beekler, and I come to you from Nerdrotic.com. And it turns out there might be a better version of The Long Night out there. Now, this has been talked about. Emergency Awesome, of course, has done a video on the possible deleted scenes, the possible 20 minutes of additional footage to The Long Night. Now, would this have made that a satisfying episode? No. Not to me, but it might have made it more entertaining. I still think having that happen before the bells, with only 3 episodes to build up the Daenerys thing, just made everything anticlimactic, and it was a rushed ending, and I don't think this would have changed it that much. But it might have changed the sentiment of the normies. It might have gone over better with the normies if they had added this in, and maybe they will in the Blu-ray. And I'll ask you out there, and you can leave a comment, do you think this would have made a difference? Because when you hear a couple of the things he wanted to put in, it sounded pretty cool. Unfortunately, we have to go to a Gizmodo site audio video by Randall Colburn. Game of Thrones director Miguel Sapochnik talks getting visually policed by showrunners. When you hear director Miguel Sapochnik say he pissed off Game of Thrones showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, you might assume it's because he forgot the lights while filming during The Long Night. Well, Dan and Dave forgot the plot, so they couldn't really get mad at him for that, could they? But no, by that point, Sapochnik had already paid his dues. On a new episode of IndieWire's Filmmaker Toolkit podcast, the director says his first few gigs on the show, seasons 5 The Gift and Hard Home, found him routinely butting up against the creators. 2 fine episodes, by the way. His crimes? Weaving in his own sense of cinematic flair. He cites a scene between Cersei and Tommen that he shot through bars to indicate the idea that Tommen is, in his own way, imprisoned by the kingdom. Later, he shot Maester Aemon's death scene in a way that mirrored his deathbed with a funeral pyre. Benioff and Weiss, he says, were none too pleased. Well, they should have listened to this guy more. And if you listen to this podcast and you hear his ideas, it is clear he would have been the better showrunner. Benioff and Weiss said it was so self-conscious and what we hate, basically, Sapochnik says. Wow. Saying that the pair preferred a much more classic style of direction. I was visually policed for the first 3 months of my shoot, and it made the creation of Hard Home really difficult because I pissed them off. But you did a great job and salvaged season 5, Miguel. His talents eventually won them over, however, leading him to become the go-to director for the pair. That said, The Long Night was nevertheless a rough shoot, and the director details its arduous creation on the podcast, saying that there was a lingering fear that it would end up being a remix of every battle we'd ever done. Well, that is if we could see it. And this comment, among others, is where we get a little light shed on Dan and Dave and how they run things. He also says he argued with Benioff and Weiss over the battle's dearth of impactful deaths. I wanted to kill everyone, he says, in news that really makes us wish he were running the show. Totally agreed. And the more I hear, the more I believe that if Miguel Sapochnik was running Game of Thrones, it would have ended a lot better. I wanted to kill Jorah in the horse charge at the beginning. I wanted it to be ruthless. So in the first 10 minutes, you could say all bets are off. Anyone could die. But David and Dan didn't want it. There was a lot of back and forth on that, Sapochnik says. He eventually relented because, and get this, there comes a point when they dig in and you just don't want to be there. And there you have it. I think that explains a lot. Dan and Dave ruling through fear and intimidation, and that could really affect your final product in a creative work. Now, there are directors like James Cameron who can be a mini dictator and get the best out of people, but I don't think Dan and Dave have that kind of respect. I think people fear them, but I don't think they have that kind of respect, and I don't think they will in the future. Good luck, Lucasfilm. Good luck, Star Wars. But let's hear some clips from the podcast. First of all, let's get a little context because that is everything. Here is Miguel talking about not wanting to do another battle.
You know, and if at one point I tried to just say, can I do 3 and 4? First I wanted to do 4 and 5, and I just didn't want to do any more battles because it's exhausting. And it takes a lot out of you, and you know, it took me, it nearly cost me my marriage and took me 6 months to physically recover from doing Battle of the Bastards and Winds of Winter. So then to suddenly be asked, I want to go and do something that was going to be almost 3 times as big and it was double the number of episodes. I was just like, I can't do this.
Now, he was offered episodes in season 7 that he turned down because of those problems, but he did go on to direct some episodes of Altered Carbon, which I've said before is a great show.
So originally, the first battle they did on Game of Thrones, they didn't show it. You just saw the aftermath because they couldn't afford it. The second battle, I think, which is Blackwater, they shot it at night because they literally didn't have the money to show that the fact that it was actually in a quarry and and in the way of our Hardhome set. And then then Watchers on the Wall was at night as well. So Hardhome, I was like, we should shoot this at night. It'll be so much easier to shoot. And they were like, no way. We want a day battle. And that's what forced Hardhome into being a day battle. So that's why we were just like, oh my God, we should have as much snow and fog as possible so we can't see anything. Again, same thing. You're trying to find ways to cover up stuff.
And that's what you've done with weather and atmosphere quite a bit.
Yeah, big time. It's the best way, it's literally put as much filth between you and the camera and the subject as possible. Battle of the Bastards, broad daylight. And so finally they were like, and this one will be at night, Miguel. And I was like, cool, finally at night.
I just don't want to think that one of the problems with the end of Game of Thrones, the biggest show in the history of the planet, the most illegally downloaded show of all time, and one that generates probably billions for HBO and Warner and AT&T, hundreds of millions, maybe a billion, that they got cheap in the end.
Actually, Fabian had gone off to do Justice League, right? And he'd come back, and Justice League is gigantic, no matter what you may think of it, it's a big production. He had gone off to do that, and he'd come back, and he was slightly like, oh right, that's how you make movies with loads of money. Well, we don't have enough money on this to make this movie this way.
So as we suspected, even this far into Game of Thrones, budget was still a problem, but we get to the battle itself, and you will hear some of the stuff that I read in the article, and you'll hear some new stuff.
What was that approach to how to maintain a story in battle, which is exhausting?
It's exactly that. How do you maintain a story? Like the spine of the two stories. The key catchphrase for Long Night was the final battle between good and evil, and for the Bells it was what have we become. And those mantras, you keep saying them back to yourself because it reminds you whether a scene should be in there or not. The 17-minute opening that Long Night has is because I didn't want to have a battle. Like, it was just me trying to hold off as long as fucking possible because I knew that there is a battle fatigue and there is a shelf life for this battle, and once we lose the audience, we've lost the audience.
Like it or not, part of our job here is to Monday morning quarterback, and I'm going to do that right now. I like Miguel Sapochnik as a director. I will watch his future works, and it sounds like Dan and Dave wanted him as well. He was their number one pick, and it sounded like he mostly wanted to do it, kind of wanted to do it, but wasn't 100% into it, and that, unfortunately, is a problem.
And seeing as there's a battle all the way through to the end, no matter what we do, or we throw at it, it's just not going to be interesting. There was the fear of it feeling like a remix of every battle we've ever done.
I know being on the set might have felt that way, but here in the audience, seeing all of our heroes, Brienne, Jaime, Jon, even Arya, Tormund, all fighting the dead with the Hound, and Bran there, hopefully warging into something, that is something we haven't seen before, and we wanted to see it so much.
There was the dissatisfaction of, we couldn't kill all the people. I wanted to kill everyone. I wanted to kill Jorah in the horse charge at the beginning. I was up for killing absolutely everyone. I wanted it to be ruthless so that in the first 10 minutes, you say all bets are off, anyone can die. And David and Dan didn't want to.
Now, whether it be success or ego or just simply losing their instincts, this happens to creatives sometimes. Dan and Dave had great instincts when it came to George R. R. Martin's source material in seasons 1 through 4, mostly. There's still some decisions I wish they would have made, like Lady Stoneheart, but it sounds like to me they just lost their instincts towards the end. Why? concentrating on Star Wars, one foot out the door. They had a bunch of money in their bank account. They weren't that hungry anymore. Who knows?
And there was a lot of back and forthing about that. And ultimately, it was because they were saving it for the bells, kind of. But there was so it was hard. So I couldn't kill anyone, and it had to be interesting. How did we do that?
Hearing what he said about Jorah and his death early, I would have loved that. I mean, I would have hated it, but it would have been great. And it sounds like to me, he would have been a very good showrunner.
I think a key thing is like, it's not my show, right? I didn't come up with the show. I didn't make it. I am a hired director to go and do that. They have let me in and let me be involved. And I've really loved doing that. But Final Cut is not mine. Final Cut is theirs. It's their choice. Also, whose ideas they take on board is their choice as well. So they let me engage, and so I engaged at every level I possibly could to try and think of how do we stop this from being a boring battle, because I don't have, I may sound weird, but I get bored doing battles. I'm not very interested in them.
And that really shows you how talented this guy is. For the most part, he's done some great battles that he's not very interested in, but it looks like to me he wasn't fully interested in the final one. And it sounds like to me he wasn't fully interested in The Long Night.
There is a very large portion of that battle, not very large, there's probably like another 20 minutes of battle that is everybody's story from the beginning to the end that we cut out, but we shot.
I'm listening.
The 24 characters in that battle,
Yeah.
I gave every single character a
Had a
story.
beginning, had a beginning, middle, and end.
All the way through, I gave them
Yep.
all a story, all in a specific interaction, all a journey that was not in the scripts. And I did it specifically because I needed to make sure that we all knew where we were. And so I wanted to try and give them tasks.
Obviously, we're talking about what could have been, but that's not what happened. But maybe we'll get these included in the Blu-ray, and maybe we'll be able to actually see the episode. And if this is the case, maybe it will improve it.
Once again, it was a much bigger sequence than we shot, and there were many things that happened that people would have been so happy to happen. Attacks of direwolves and crazy stuff, and all that. And at some point, you're like, 50 direwolves attacking an undead dragon does not a good movie make.
Did you shoot this, or is this an idea that was
No,
on
it's stuff we did not shoot.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Miguel, you are obviously a very talented director, but you are dead wrong on that one. As a fan of science fiction and fantasy for over 4 decades, 50 direwolves attacking an undead dragon does a good TV show make.
From that means this was the end, therefore it needed to be big, because it's based on 70 hours of build up. Like you're not going out with a whimper on this one, you're going to go out on.
And story does become shorter at the end. You don't stretch story out. You move, push things together and move it quicker.
Yeah, and you reach your conclusion, and I think that's a specific choice that they made, and one could almost argue that it could probably have been done even faster. I mean, it could probably have been done without a 7th season.
Again, I'm going to have to disagree with you, Miguel, on that one. The first 4 seasons were long and prodding and intricate and sophisticated, with complex storylines and complex characters that allowed time to develop, and then to all of a sudden punch the gas pedal and rush on through it. It needed 3 more seasons at least.
Even within The Long Night, there was an extended battle sequence where you saw the Night King fight. Very long, kind of like there was a whole bunch of stuff that was going to happen. But when we got there, not to shooting, but in the process of prep, and you start to prioritize what's important, and this is like a micro version of what we're just talking about. At the end of an 80-minute battle, do I really care if the Night King's got some fancy moves with his spear? Like, do I really give a shit about that?
After spending 8 seasons waiting for this episode, this moment, which should have been multiple episodes, hell yes!
And nobody sat there and wondered if it was going to be too dark.
To give a little context and to be fair, the interviewer just brought up the elephant in the room, the darkness of The Long Night, half the audience not being able to see the actual episode.
But the decision was specific, and I've got the rough cuts. Is it brighter than the final piece? Yeah, totally it is. Hasn't been graded. There was a series of decisions, and in the end, one of the things that happens when you do television is you're not involved in the whole process. But you're not involved in the whole process, and eventually they get to a place where decisions are made, and what I saw is like everybody who was making it thought about it a lot, but hook, line and sinker into the idea that it was about embracing the darkness, and made that decision.
Now they are referencing the people, including myself, who could not see the episode, and they blame iPhones and iPads. Well, I was watching it on a 4K 60-inch TV, a mid-grade one, but a pretty damn good one. While I could probably see more than the iPad or iPhone people, I couldn't see much of the episode, and I was confused.
So we made a conscious decision to go down that road. I must say, I've watched it on every format I have available to me to try and work out what's going on. I haven't had a problem with seeing what I needed to see to know what was going on. That said, I've also seen it 1,000 times, so because I made it, so I would know.
The only thing that drove me nuts about the conversation was the sense that the cinematography was problematic. Because to be honest with you, it's beautiful.
It's fucking awesome.
I
can say this one you can totally put on the record. Fabian Wagner did a fucking awesome job on that. I would challenge anyone to do what he did.
Challenge accepted.
I think the argument about the long night, it's called the fucking long night, sorry, but it is called the long night, and long and night, and all in the same thing, that I think that the thing is, with time and with the opportunity to see it in a cinema, maybe.
So he's trying to back his guys, and I totally understand that. But to bring up the fact that you want to see it in the cinema, I don't ever want to see this series again because of the long night. Is it all your fault? No, it sounds like a lot of your footage was cut out, and it sounds like Dan and Dave just rushed things to the end, and it sounds like you were tired too, Miguel, and who can blame you? You're human, but this is a business, and this is going to hurt genre in the end. This is going to hurt fantasy, because people are going to now, when they go into a fantasy series like The Lord of the Rings, they're going to go, is this going to go Game of Thrones on me? With anything genre now, are people going to get burned out at the end? Are they going to get cheap in the end? Is it going to get canceled? These are the kind of things that streaming services and the new broadcasters are going to have to deal with as genre stays popular. Now, if it stays popular forever, who knows? But we had our one chance to have one of the greatest shows on TV be genre, be fantasy, and that's great for us nerds. The problem is when you don't stick the landing, then it makes everybody look bad, including your legacy, and that's something you have to think of. So yes, I know you're tired. 55 days of shooting, it almost cost your marriage. For one, your wife has to know that you are a film director and you will be away for long periods of time, or your partner. I'm assuming it's a wife, I have no idea. But that's part of the job. And really, in the long run, 10 years from now, you'll think about that extra week, that extra month, that extra few $1 million you could have spent when you have it, WB and AT&T and HBO, and think what a difference that would have made, and people would have still been talking about your show in a positive light in a decade, instead of when a show fails, it's now called a Game of Thrones. Well, I thought you might find that interesting. I certainly did. Would it have made the episode better and the season better? No, not really. Everybody have a great day, and may the free folk sing songs of your greatness.
Nerdrotic.com. Please subscribe.